Hello and good morning. We are back with Hoosier Gameday, of course, brought to you by the Hoosier Network. As always, Liv Clements, Ryan Canfield, and it is homecoming week for the Hoosiers, and they're 6-0, coming off bye week. When you saw that Northwestern game, what did you like most about that Hoosier play?
Well, what was best about the Northwestern game was Indiana showed that they could play in a track meet. We thought that Maryland might be a track meet, but they kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit. Northwestern came out and put a couple points on Indiana early in the first half, and maybe, you didn't see anything like that from Northwestern early in this season, and they pull it out against one of the best teams in the Big Ten. But Indiana responded. How they responded was fantastic, and the environment in which they did it with the lakefront stadium, I think that was probably just a very nice win for Indiana, and they showed that they can come from behind, if that need be the case anytime else in this season.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of momentum going into this season, but coming off a bye week, how does that hurt them and how does that benefit them? Because they had a lot of momentum going in those 6 games. Now it's kind of at a halt. But does it hurt them more? Does it benefit them more going into this Nebraska game?
It's kind of a yin and yang with this bye week. So while you have a chance to, have an in-house scouting of practice, you're not as conditioned as you were. I get practicing is the kind of conditioning there. But just the week off could take a little bit of momentum for the on-field stuff that is not in the facility. I think that they'll be fine, though. I think that this team they don't make enough mistakes for me to be worried about how they're going to play off of extended rest.
And I think the big thing was how Curtis Rourke was able to adjust. So he's already shown that UCLA he can play away. Northwestern, he showed he can play away. How does someone navigate his play style and just explain it to someone who hasn't watched it going into this Nebraska game too?
And don't forget the 2 picks that he threw against Maryland.
Exactly, and still adjusted.
The first couple plays, his first couple throws, I think Curtis Rourke, we'll talk about him later, as I know you got something for him, but the way that he has been, put under pressure and finds his way out of it with his receivers, with his running backs, I think that he has met every expectation. And we've probably talked about it. How many shows have we done? 7?
Yeah.
We've probably talked about him, just this little segment on him every single week, and it's just great to see. And he's getting some national recognition, whether it's Pro Football Focus or On3, giving him a couple Heisman rankings, not quite in the 4 to where he could get a vote or an invitation to New York, but his name is out there. People know who he is. They know he's the quarterback for this 6-0 Indiana team.
And for Indiana to even have a quarterback that's in Heisman talk is insane. So I want to get into some of his highlights from Northwestern because it was a game to watch. Rourke has just been on fire. Finds Lawton with the strike to start the game against Northwestern. Straight down the middle. Of course, always finding Omar Cooper Jr. with 2 defenders on him, but he makes it work. 14 touchdowns this season Rourke has, and it's insane, averaging 73% completion going into the second half of the schedule. And you look at the movement. Finds his way out of the pocket with pressure and makes a dot to Keyshawn Williams for the first down move the sticks. Rourke has been showing he can do it all from the run game to the pass game, and with the long pass to his right-hand man, Omar Cooper Jr. And what a fun play. Let's just add this one in there. Finds Miles Cross with the one-toe tap. Go ahead and put it on the highlights. And there's just no doubt they're a force in the Big Ten. If you think about it, it's competitive this year. 3 are in the top 25, in the top 5 of the top 25, excuse me. So how do you explain when it comes to Big Ten being a powerhouse? Does it match up with those other big conferences like the SEC and ACC?
Well, I think, before last week, before Ohio State and Oregon played, every conference outside of the Big Ten, because Ohio State was the clear number 1 favorite, has had some chaos, with Alabama losing after they beat Georgia. So Alabama, Georgia, Mizzou has a loss. Tennessee has a loss. They can very well get another one when they play Alabama this weekend. So there's really one team in the country that has shown that they have been like the best, most consistent. That's Texas. Everyone else, it's really a free-for-all, and especially with Ohio State losing, I think that really opens up the Big Ten. And if Penn State would have lost to USC, that would have opened the door very much for Indiana and a lot of other teams. But right now, I think it's a 4-horse race in the Big Ten.
Well, you see that there's 3 teams still undefeated in the Big Ten. You have Indiana, Oregon, and Penn State. But right below them is like Illinois and Nebraska and Ohio State with that 1 loss. Do you see that drastically changing going into the second half? Do you see that still probably staying consistent?
Well, with the teams that were traditionally in the Big Ten West, I feel like that could stay with them and, lose a couple games that they're not supposed to. I really thought that Nebraska was going to beat Illinois a couple weeks ago. How many ever weeks that was. But Illinois, I mean, they've been much improved.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good win for them. But there are also a bunch of places where these teams could slip up. I mean, they gave up 49 points to Purdue last week. And there are just a lot of teams in the Big Ten that it's just a mitigated chaos with Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State watching over it all. And I think maybe even IU could slip up a couple times.
When I tell you that UCLA, USC, and Washington are all at the bottom at the Big Ten, and I told you that, if I would have told you that last season, that when they joined, they were going to be at the bottom of the Big Ten, what would your response have been?
Before last season or after last season?
I'll say after last season.
I would not be too shocked because USC, they had glaring problems on defense all last season. They bring in Danton Lynn. It has not much changed. Right. And I think Miller Moss is not a terrible quarterback. It's a bit of a coaching thing, whether it's with Lynn or Lincoln Riley. I don't really see any vision there for UCLA, especially when they can't put up points against, not the best defenses. Like Minnesota, they scored, I think,
Hawaii,
17,
their first game,
17 points. And then UCLA, it's been a crapshoot there ever since, Dorian Thompson-Robinson left.
Yeah.
And then with Washington, I don't think they're not a great team, but they're not the worst team in the Big Ten. It's just you're going to have some turnover like that when you lose your entire roster, your entire coaching staff. So that's going to happen, and we'll see them in a couple weeks. But I think, I'm not too shocked that the out West teams are struggling.
I mean, I feel like IU's kind of shown that they're not scared of the new teams coming in. I mean, it's like you said, it's weird, though, with Washington looking so competitive last season with Michigan, and then coming in this season, they lose their coach to Alabama. You would think, though, that they're still a powerhouse team and they can still make it work.
Well, I mean, again, with the turnover of the transfer portal and the NFL, everybody just being shipped away, it's kind of different. But when you say that IU should not be scared about these West opponents, they really don't have a reason to be scared because UCLA, ever since from the jump this season, we knew that this season was never going to go in their favor, especially when you have a quarterback like Ethan Garbers. And, Washington, as I just said, we'll see them in a couple weeks. And I think it'll be, while they're not the best team, I think Will Rogers will pose a nice, competition for this Hoosier defense.
And the big competition coming up is Nebraska this Saturday. I know you and Zion are about to talk about it. So let's get straight into this Nebraska game for IU's homecoming weekend.
All right, to break down Nebraska, we promised you he would be on the show. One of the best IU sports media has to offer, Hoosier Network, WIUX, formerly Indy Star. Zion Brown, how are you, man?
I'm good, Ryan. How's it going, dude?
It's going great. We promised to get you on, and this is probably the highest leverage we've had this season. We've circled this game for a long time. Yeah. And especially with Nebraska returning to its rightful spot in college football. I mean, 5-1 for the first time in a long time.
Yeah.
So we know that this Nebraska team is different. What makes them different?
I think the main thing that stands out to me is that this year, this Nebraska team can throw the football. And last year, they struggled to do that. They only averaged about 130 passing yards a game a season ago. They went through a couple different quarterbacks, Chuba Purdy, a few guys. They just didn't get it done for them last year. This year, I know we're going to talk about the specific name later, but this year, this team has at least a little more confidence in what they can do through the air because their defense was great last year. They only gave up about 18 points a game. So their defense was still pretty good last year under Matt Rule, but now their offense has caught up a bit, and it makes them a much more dangerous team than they were in 2023.
Something that I've been harping on our podcast ever since Matt Rule was hired at Nebraska, he's just brought this, this culture that he had at Temple and Baylor. Not so much with the Carolina Panthers, but what is working for Matt Rule that did not work under Scott Frost?
You just mentioned it. Matt Rule has developed these programs. He's built programs at Temple and Baylor. Temple, he had 2 10-win seasons there. At Baylor, he recovered from the Art Browns disaster. The way that ended, he got that team back on track to be a really good team nationally. Obviously, it didn't work with the Panthers, but when you look at Scott Frost, he had only been a head coach for 2 years before Nebraska hired him. A lot of that was the fact that he was an alum. They wanted to get him in. And he had that great, national championship season at UCF. But it was only 2 years he was there. He didn't really build that program up in the way that we have seen Matt Rule already build 2 programs up and maybe a third one now as Nebraska looks to be on track to get back to kind of perennial status in the Big Ten.
So now let's talk about the fun part with the quarterback. Dylan Raiola, probably the next coming of Scott Frost, the son of a legend, Lions legend, Dominic Raiola, started as a recruit at Ohio State, goes to Georgia, moves his whole family to Georgia to go play in Buford in high school, Then he finally settles down in Nebraska. He's probably the best quarterback that Nebraska fans have seen since Taylor Martinez in the early parts of the 2010s. What makes him so effective?
When I watch Dylan Raiola, he's smart. Like, as a true freshman, he seems like he knows exactly what he's doing. That's the reason he got this job as a true freshman, as a starter. He is a poised quarterback, and he really understands where the ball needs to be and when it needs to get there, which you do not see from a guy that's 18, 19 years old a lot in college football. So that's what stands out to me about him. He's a very polished quarterback, a bigger guy, and he just knows what he's doing out there. He doesn't seem rattled a lot by different coverages and the way the defenses play him. And like I said, he has been the difference so far this year. He hasn't been perfect. Like, I'm not going to act like he's on Heisman watch or anything like that. But he's a lot better than what Nebraska had last year. And like I said, that defense has already been solid for 2 years now. So when you get a quarterback that is at least somewhat capable of making throws when he needs to, it changes your offense completely, and thus it changes the team.
Yeah, look for Isaiah Nair, the Wyoming and Texas transfer, Dante Dowdell in the backfield. You mentioned the Husker defense being solid for a couple seasons. Who on the Husker defense is going to give the most trouble for Curtis Rourke, and how are they going to get him into the troubling situations?
I look at linebacker John Bullock, who I think kind of plays a few different positions, or plays a few different roles, I should say. He is the linebacker, but the senior is experienced. He leads the team in tackles so far this year. He had a pick six against Purdue a couple of weeks ago. So when I look at somebody who could give IU trouble, it's Bullock, because they will rush him, but they also put him back in coverage to get interceptions and get pass breakups. So when you look at him, he is somebody that Indiana needs to have circled before every snap, because he can be very dangerous. He leads this great defense that is only giving up 11 points a game right now. So you have to look at him, but really the whole defense. I think on all three levels, this is a pretty poised and sound Nebraska defense.
Yeah, and look for Ty Robinson and Nash Hutchmacher, very Nebraska name right there. So finally, who wins this game, and how does it get done?
Oh, man. Ryan, I'm gonna lean IU.
Okay.
I think the running game is the difference. IU has that kind of triple running attack, those three running backs who are all very good, very experienced. Whereas Nebraska this year, they've been just okay on the ground. So I feel like that gives the Hoosiers a bit of an edge. They can control time of possession that way and have these longer possessions that wear out the Nebraska defense. So I think the Hoosiers, homecoming week, sold-out crowd, I feel like there's too much going right for Indiana. I know that may concern Kurt Cignetti, because he's a guy that wants to limit all distractions. So the fact that all these hooplas coming on around the team, big new kickoffs here this week, all of that is probably very concerning to Kurt Cignetti and his coaching staff. But coming off a bye week, they're going to be healthy and rested. So is Nebraska, too, coming off a bye. But I just feel like the Hoosiers this week will not lay an egg. So I think they win it 30-24 is going to be my final score prediction.
One more thing I forgot. We've asked every guest that's been on the show, as an Indy guy, what is the significance in your mind of this whole season in perspective? What is the cultural significance? I
mean, it shows really from the moment Kurt Cignetti was hired all the way up to now, this 6-0 season that Indiana is having. It shows that Indiana, as a program, as an athletic department, is committed to football, right? It shows they went out and got a guy that, Google him, he wins, Like, they went out and got somebody who they know is proven, who they know, they want to build around and have this program centered around in Kurt Cignetti. And then it shows that Kurt Cignetti can coach. I mean, it has been such a turnaround from what last season was, a 3-win season with so many disappointing games down the stretch. And to see this team just come out week in and week out and dominate so far, Ryan, even if you would have said, okay, they have a weak schedule, maybe they can start 5-1 or 6-0. I don't know if anybody expected it to look like this. So it's a big deal, and I think people around the nation are really starting to take notice.
One more thing. Does Indiana trail in this game? They're one of the two FBS teams with Army to not trail this season. Do they trail?
I'll say yes, because at the end of the day, you can't go a whole season without trailing at some point. So I don't know when. I don't know if it'll be early or maybe in the third or fourth quarter. But I'll say, yeah, they do trail at some point on Saturday.
Maybe if Nebraska gets the ball first. I mean, in the first quarter or the second half, they will probably pull something out. All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan.
After talking with Zion, I'm way more excited for this game, because the crowd is going to be insane. And for all the people going, yes, IU just sold out their whole Memorial Stadium for this Nebraska game, because Nebraska coming in, how do they navigate that home crowd? Because it's going to be insane.
Well, Nebraska is no stranger to large crowds, whether when they go on the road or they're at home. They have 100,000 capacity in their stadium. So they are no stranger to sold-out Ruckus fans. And they have some of the best fans in the country. We look forward to welcoming them to Bloomington. But I think, they could, the Memorial Stadium crowd could get to the true freshman quarterback, Dylan Raiola. I think that, this game is not going to, it's going to be one on the field. You know, it's not gonna. The Nebraska team is too experienced outside of the quarterback. It's too experienced to have this factor in too much. And I will say, we talked about it before we came on. I've said it on HNCFB a lot that this team makes college football better. Whether they're in Lincoln or they're on the road, Nebraska or college football is better when Nebraska is good. And I think that they have some great leaders, and it starts with their coach, Matt Rule. And I know Zion and I just talked about it, but I think, this game is just a great game. And we circled this game on the schedule.
We did.
Right when it came out, before the season even started. I think, this is just a classic Big Ten matchup. Two very potent offenses that I just think are going to be sludged down to two really good defenses.
I mean, like you said, great offense, great defense. What do you think this game will come down to, though?
I think it's going to be the team that limits the mistakes. And Curtis Rourke, I mean, outside of those two Maryland picks, I mean, he has not made that many mistakes.
Exactly.
Dylan Raiola, he's, again, not even close to the experience level of Curtis Rourke, but he's not a turnover factory. I see right here, only thrown 3 interceptions this season. So I think that they're they make good decisions.
Yep.
But I think the Indiana defense will put Raiola in some tough situations. I think Indiana comes out on top on this one. 28-20. Nebraska will have a chance to go drive down the field, maybe a desperation turnover, but it's a one-possession game going into the final drive.
28-20, I 28-21. They're right there. I'll get you up there by 1 point. So this weekend, this Saturday, IU and Nebraska homecoming. Next week, we'll be back, of course, to go ahead into that Washington game, which is not a sleeper. So IU fans, you better be there. Of course, Liv Clements, Ryan Canfield, and we'll see you guys next week.